welcome back to our mini-series, The Lone Screenplay Winners, where we talk about films that only won an Oscar in the writing categories. My name is Matthew Anderson, and today we have a much more experienced Oscar predictor, a very good friend of Jack Mahane's as well, who was also on Gold Derby as well, Tariq Khan on the podcast. How you doing, man?
Matthew, great to be with you.
Awesome. Yeah, it was wonderful to I obviously you being you having a much more busier life than me. It was, when I got the message from you saying that you would be on the show, I'd be like, awesome, great. Now I got to find a time and date of like when he's able to do it, and obviously adjust to his schedule, and I was okay with doing that. But yeah, it's great to have you on the show. And I look forward to especially talking about the film you chose for today, which we'll get into in just a second.
Great. Is it a secret right now? Do people not know yet what film we'll be talking about?
Yeah. They when this episode goes up, there'll be like secret episode number 5. No.
Oh, great. Secret.
It'll be a big twist, just like the movie was.
That's right. Twist. Exactly.
So yeah, without further ado, let's just jump right into our discussion. We're going to be talking about, with big spoilers, for a movie that's over 30 years old, 40 years old. I'm not really good at math right now in the moment. The Crying Game, which was released in 1992, and it was written and directed by Neil Jordan. As far as what the film's premise is, in case if you are not aware of what the movie is, I mean, I still got to give out what the premise is for the movie in case people are like, what is this movie about? Essentially, it's about a British soldier kidnapped by the IRA, soon befriends one of his captors, who then becomes drawn into that soldier's world. That's the basic gist of the premise of what it is. So before we begin our discussion, I might want to ask, out of all the films from this list of the Lone Screenplay Winners, and, Tariq, you've been around a lot longer than I have, not just, covering the Oscars, but even just watching movies in general. Why was it that this was the one, when I brought up the invite for you to come onto the show, why was it that this was the one you wanted, I need to discuss this with Matt? Like, what was in this that made you go, that's the one I want to go for?
Oh, of course, Matthew. Well, can I first just tell people I've been watching the Oscars since 1978. And this year, it was the award season of the winter of 1993. It was so fascinating because this was before the internet and before Gold Derby, before we had, dozens and dozens or hundreds and hundreds of pundits everywhere. And The Crying Game, it was getting so much attention on television and in magazines and in newspapers over the secret plot twist. And so I didn't have a chance to actually see the movie until just before the Oscars. But there was just so much discussion about it. It was so fascinating that as we headed into the Oscars, we kind of knew that original screenplay was its best chance to win a major award, and it did. And this was just a classic best original screenplay winner, The Crying Game. And so, I thought it'd be fascinating to discuss and revisit that race and discuss many of the fascinating things which happened that award season.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah, because it is jumping into the movie itself, though. I did want to discuss the fact that, well, first off, this is my first viewing I'd seen of it. Unfortunately, I didn't tell you this over the emails, Tariq, but I did know the twist going into the movie. But even if I didn't know the twist about the movie itself, I probably would have guessed it early on, especially with how Neil Jordan is setting up several clues throughout the film, alluding to, the big twist. But before I go any further with my thoughts on the movie, what did you think of the movie overall? Has it changed for on a rewatch for you? Has it stayed the same? Like, what's your general thoughts on this?
Honestly, I'll be honest, I've seen it 3 times in the past, so I didn't rewatch it recently, but every time I watched it, I appreciated it. I thought it was, very well written, very well acted, and one of the great things about The Crying Game was the way that really drew you into this story, the way that you really felt like you were part of that world, that gritty London, underworld, and the way that you felt like you were almost eavesdropping on these people's lives, and when Stephen Ray's character, when he was experiencing what he was, you almost felt like you were going along for the ride with him. And that's what really made the film so compelling. And I think that's why, really, at the time, it was so well received by the Academy. And recall, of course, this was a few years after films like Driving Miss Daisy and Dances with Wolves had won Best Picture. So the time was actually almost surprising that The Crying Game had done so well with the Academy and did score 6 nominations because, at the time it wouldn't have been a sure thing given their traditional tastes, especially back then.
Yeah, this we'll definitely talk about the award section of the film definitely a little bit later on in the episode, but I will say, in terms of my thoughts on the movie, as someone who wasn't, obviously I was never conceived or born around this time, it was interesting to see how the film is it had a really interesting a lot of interesting ideas and themes presented in the film, especially with tackling the British versus the IRA, especially around that time. And it was even fascinating to see Stephen Ray play a very complex character, an individual who is not like, and he's not really the biggest, savior type character you would see in this kind of story, or and he does somewhat go on an arc over the course of the film, but at the end of the day, he's still this flawed individual who was okay being a kidnapper and such, and committing these this I guess like I don't know if you would call it like war crimes or whatnot. I'm not too familiar with my history on this subject matter, but I thought overall that the story, the way that Neil Jordan tells the story, I thought was really interesting, and to the point where despite knowing what the twist was going into it, I was still engaged enough with it, and a lot of it really came from Neil Jordan's script, and even just the attention to detail of like setting up the breadcrumbs to the quote unquote twist. And even if you know the twist ahead of time, it's still an entertaining movie. You got a lot of great performances by Stephen Ray, Miranda Richardson, Jim Broadbent, who I forgot played like a really minor role in this.
Yeah, he was the bartender, right?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's the bartender,
Yes.
and he's not in it much. He's only in it like a little spurts here and there, but he's still good in the movie. I didn't get a chance. I'm kind of curious to know how far into Jim Broadbent's career this was, because I know almost a decade later he would end up winning an Oscar for Iris in supporting actor. It was also interesting too, the fact that I think I'd mentioned this book several times already. I'm not sure if you already own a copy of this, Tariq. Oscar Wars, I think it was called, by Michael Schulberg. I can't remember the author's name, but like it was a book recently that came out in like the last 2 years covering some of the Oscar races, and it was interesting how when they campaigned for this movie, they made sure to not have as many interviews with Jay Davidson as possible, like just because once they put Jay Davidson out to the public, it's like you already know what the twist is.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I just thought that was really interesting to learn some of those details behind the scenes on this film, and again, just a really well constructed enough film, and I enjoyed it overall. I wouldn't quite put it like a masterpiece, quote unquote, but there were enough things in it that I was engaged with, like I said, the writing and the performances, but yeah, but anything you wanted to say about the movie itself?
Oh, yeah, well, interesting. You mentioned Jim Broadbent, a future Oscar winner who appeared in the film. And, of course, and one more, Forrest Whitaker, of course, played a key role at the beginning of the film. And he went on to win, of course, Best Actor of 2006 for The Last King of Scotland. So The Crying Game was kind of a good luck charm for a couple of stars. Not Miranda Richardson or Stephen Ray, unfortunately, but for Forrest Whitaker and Jim Broadbent. So not bad.
Yeah, or David Davidson, because
exactly
this ended
right.
up being his only Oscar nomination. But yeah, as far as the what was your obviously, because it sounds like you didn't get a chance to see the movie in time, but you know at least enough of the movie, or at least have seen enough of it enough times to know what your thoughts are on it. Was there anything else about the movie that you particularly enjoyed or thought, like in terms of like a character level, or like what Neil Jordan did to tell this story, that you thought was really impressive, or anything that was engaging for you?
Well, really, the most important thing that I want to talk about is Jay Davidson's performance. And now it's
Okay.
okay here if we mention the secret, right? I mean,
Yeah,
is that
yeah, you're
okay?
good. It's
Oh, of course,
spoilers.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, right. I mean, the thing is that watching Jay Davidson the film, and you felt like he wasn't acting. Like this felt like such a genuine characterization that made it so fascinating. And I think that's one of the reasons why the movie was as successful as it was. Because, it's funny, Gene Siskel, when he was talking about the movie, that he said that it could have been like, it could have been like a drag show or something. It could have been something almost over the top, a caricature. But Jay Davidson made that character, Dill was the name, I believe, right? Dill was it the character's name?
I think so. Yeah.
Uh, made Dill so human and so real and so believable that I think really was the secret ingredient, no pun intended, to the Crying Game. What made it, such, really a fascinating motion picture experience. And if they had miscast that role somehow, if the part had not been played as well, if it came across the wrong way, I think the film, would have been a disaster. But I think the casting of Jay Davidson and the performance that Neil Jordan brought out, I think was pure genius, and that's where the film I think succeeded on so many different levels.
It does, and I agree too. Even though, like I said, I kind of knew some of the breadcrumbs going into it, especially with how. I mean, obviously, you look at the, you look at the fact that he got nominated for supporting actor. It's like right then and there, you already know the secret. But even if you didn't know that, if you were just like a normie audience, just being like, you know what, I just want to throw in the Crying Game and just throw it on. He does have a lot of detailed nuances in the role, and he is very believable as this character. And you're right though, like if they hired the wrong actor to play this role, it just would not have worked as well as it did. I will say though, even though I really admire and really like what Jay Davidson did for the role, I'm not quite on as high as you are on the performance, but I still like it overall. And I think Jay Davidson is definitely a worthy nomination, for sure, for the supporting acting category. Um, and yeah, you're right though. Going back to what you said earlier about Forrest Whitaker, I actually forgot he was in the movie. And part of the reason why is that I mean, it was a little bit distracting to hear Forrest Whitaker, give that British accent when
Right.
I'm more used to him seeing him in stuff like even just watching clips of him in like The Last King of Scotland, Lee Daniels' The Butler, or seeing his small role in what was the movie Color Money. So it took me a while to sort of get used to the accent of like, wait, oh yeah, Forrest Whitaker doesn't usually talk like this.
Right, exactly.
It's just for the role. What did you think of Stephen Ray and the other actors in the film? Like, well, particularly Stephen Ray and Miranda Richardson's performances, because I have a feeling you probably have some thoughts on their performances.
Oh yeah, of course, Stephen Ray was terrific. It was not a really flashy performance. So at the time, his nomination for Best Actor, and he did make the lineup, was not a sure thing. I think he was talked about, but he was not a lock by any means. So the fact that he got in, I think it was the fact that actors appreciated, the skill of that performance, and even though it didn't have a lot of range, though, he played the part very, very well, and there was nothing that was exaggerated, nothing which was overdone about the part, and a lot of what was going on with that character was really, beneath the surface. What's going on, inside his mind, and he was able to project so much of that. So I think that was one of the key things to that performance, and why he was nominated for Best Actor. Of course, we should mention he obviously had no chance of winning that year. He was up against Al Pacino in *Son of a Woman*, who kind of, was the early favorite from the day the season began, and he pretty much, swept that year. So Ray's nomination was the win for him. Now, Miranda Richardson, that was a great performance, a very small part. That was a great year for her because she, of course, was also in Enchanted April and in Damage, and she won the New York Film
Oh.
Critics Award of Best Supporting Actress for all three of those films. And around the Oscar season, it wasn't clear, which film she'd be nominated for at the Oscars, because she was nominated and won the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a comedy musical for Enchanted April, a leading actress, and was nominated for Supporting Actress for Damage. And of course, The Crying Game was a bigger Oscar contender than Enchanted April or Damage. So going into the Oscar nominations, we weren't sure where she would show up, but she was nominated for Damage. It's funny. Of course, in Damage, the film with Jeremy Irons and Juliette Binoche, she had this great scene that was just perhaps one of the most intense, memorable scenes from the year of 1992. She was just that incredible. Now that scene got her the nomination. It's funny, if she'd been nominated for The Crying Game, I almost wonder if she would have had a better chance of winning because that was Best Picture nominee. Whereas in Damage, as great as she was the film's only nomination. So I wonder if she'd been nominated for The Crying Game, if voters would have considered that performance in Damage and Enchanted April, and she might have had a better chance. But Damage was, I think, where she deserved the nomination, but the win didn't happen. Of course, she lost to Marissa Tomei in My Cousin Vinny, a famous Oscar upset. But a
Yeah.
great performance from Miranda Richardson as well.
Yeah, I actually I remember I almost forgot she was in Damage, but I completely didn't know that she was in Enchanted April. So that's really interesting to know that she had like 3 performances that year, and yeah, I could see why that was kind of like a pickle of like, what do we do with this? Like, what are we predicting? Yeah, and it's also interesting too how that's a good point you bring up though, Tarek, about Miranda Richardson though, how every once in a while just so our audiences are aware as well with the Oscars, history in of itself. Every once in a while, when an actor has a really great year like that, where you have multiple films out that year, sometimes they're able to get in with just the one performance. Where and correct me if I'm wrong here, where sometimes it feels like some of these voters would rally around like, okay, we have a better shot at nominating said person for this film, even though we much prefer him in this other film. So let's at least try to get him a nomination somewhere for how great of a career or a year he had in film. And sometimes it does go with like the best picture, the stronger film overall. Sometimes they end up going with like I don't know, like this year, pretty much, where it's like we'll nominate Miranda Richardson for Damage over, she could have easily gotten in for Crying Game, maybe. Would you agree with that?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah,
Oh,
okay,
absolutely.
perfect.
No question. And for example, take for example, Nicole Kidman, 2001, when she had both Moulin Rouge and The Others. And at the time, it wasn't clear which film she'd have a better chance for. I believe that Nicole Kidman herself actually thought that she might have a better chance for the Others because it was more dramatic, as opposed to Moulin Rouge, which was a musical. But she got the Oscar nomination for Moulin Rouge because it was a Best Picture nominee. And it's funny, at the time, actually, I thought Nicole Kidman would have had a better chance for The Others because it was more, it was a drama. It was a more serious, even though it was a horror film, it was still a more serious performance than Moulin Rouge, I thought. So, but she got that nomination for Moulin Rouge. But yeah, in this case here, Richardson got the nomination for the film that did not get recognized in either category. It was not a Best Picture nominee, but the one where I think the voters felt that really was the more deserving performance. Because really, her part in The Crying Game, she was great. It was very small. And so Damage was her standout work of the year. Oh, and by the way, it's funny, in supporting actress, Joan Plowright, her co-star in Enchanted April, was nominated as well. So she was
Yep.
competing against her Enchanted April castmate. And unfortunately, it's funny, Plowright was actually seen as the favorite for many. She won the Golden Globe, but it was not meant to be for either Plowright or Amanda Richardson or Judy Davidson, Husbands and Wives, or Vanessa Redgrave and Howard Sanders. They all famously lost to Marissa Tomei, the only American, in the comedy My Cousin Vinny.
Wow. Yeah, I've seen that performance from My Cousin Vinny, and yeah, she earned the Oscar. I know there's a lot of people out there that are not the biggest fan of that performance of the film. Like my dad famously did not care for that film or that performance. But when I got to the ending, I'm like, yeah, I would have voted for Marissa Tomei. Then again, I haven't seen the rest of the lineup. I need to watch them all. But that's just me.
Yeah. Yeah, Matthew. By the way, it's too bad that you and probably many of our listeners weren't around. Weren't alive to watch that season because Marissa Tomei getting the nomination was kind of a surprise in the first place. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, we didn't have Gold Derby, so we didn't really have odds. But it's funny. The late film critic from Good Morning America, Joel Siegel, he actually mentioned Marissa Tomei as a wild card, and so when she got the nomination that morning, I was like, wow, he really called it, and nobody thought that she had a chance. And at that Oscars that year, that was the very first award that they presented, was supporting actress Jack Palance, and nobody really knew which way this race was going to go, whether it would be Joan Plowright or Judy Davis or perhaps Miranda Richardson. So when he called out Marissa Tomei, I mean, people were shocked, and
Wow.
I'm sad for people who weren't alive to witness that great Oscar upset moment, because it was fantastic and just talked about for days and weeks and months and now years.
And you said it was the first award of the night.
The first award of the night, right? And of course, Jack Palance, he sort of prolonged it because he was doing some more one on push-ups and making all these these various jokes whatnot, and yeah, so it really was. I mean, he kept people waiting, and so when he opened the envelope and finally said the name, it was Marissa Tomei. I mean, people were shocked.
Wow. That's yeah, I would have loved to have been there live to be like from the moment like that season started to the Oscars to be like, what the hell is happening with this race?
Yes, if we
Um
had, like, let's say, Gold Derby back then, if we had like in the internet and awards odds, it would have been a fascinating race for pundits to analyze. It would have just been so brilliant.
yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. There's definitely loads you could talk about with that. Going back to the crying game real quick. I wanted to see if there was anything else I wanted to bring up in terms of my thoughts on the movie itself, or is there anything else that stood out? Oh, you know what? There were a couple things I wanted to I did want to talk about briefly, and it kind of showed like what we were talking about with Jim Broadbent about how a lot of these people working on these older films, especially this kind of movie, it's like look at where they are now, years later. We already mentioned Forrest Whitaker, we mentioned Jim Broadbent. Sandy Powell did the costume design on this, and that is something that I'm like, holy crap. Like later on, she would be this like multi-nominated winning costume designer working on stuff like The Aviator. She did, I think Hugo was another one. She won her first Oscar for Shakespeare in Love. Like
Right. Mm-hmm.
it's crazy to see some of these, even just in the tech fields or the below the line categories or below the line crews of like, them going on to do such great things. Even Ann Dudley, I think, who did the music for this, she won an Oscar
Yes.
for Full Monty, which I recognized that name when I saw it as I was watching the credits, but I was like, this is such a familiar name. Why? What? Like, it's on the tip of my tongue. Where is she from? And I had to look. I'm like, oh, she did the score for Full Monty. Nice. But yeah, and it's really interesting to see again, just like all these old movies that I'm exploring for the first time. It's really fascinating to see how many of them have these like, at the time, previously unknown people, and now here they are like 20, 30 plus years later, and they're now like Oscar nominated, multi-Oscar winners.
Right.
So I just think it's really interesting and fascinating. I also read somewhere that before this movie, Neil Jordan had a really hard time getting this financed because the fact that he had a string of box office flops here and there, and that this was sort of like a lucky break for him that it ended up coming through with its funding and became like a surprise box office hit, which I think, to your point, Tariq, I think we really have to credit that to like the big twist of the movie where it's like, they made sure they kept that as secretive as possible, because if they let that secret out, it was everyone's like, yeah, I already know the twist. Anyways, moving on. So I really find it fascinating that this became like I wouldn't say like a comeback for Neil Jordan, financially speaking, but it was a box office hit, and yeah, I just find it really interesting, and it's even interesting the fact that I finally sat down and watched it, and when I got to the end, I'm like, yeah, all right, I can see why a lot of people talk about it even to this day, and even that screenplay win in and of itself and such. But yeah, before we go even further into the awards race itself, because I actually have a couple questions I want to pull from you, Tariq, if you don't mind. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about with The Crying Game as a movie in of itself?
Great. Well, I'll just mention, people, if you've not seen it, and I'm sure you know the twist now. Still, it's worth watching. I think that you will get a lot out of it. You'll appreciate the performances, the writing, of course, and the directing. And so, even if you feel like the movie's been spoiled, I would encourage you to check it out, because it really is a great film. And again, putting it in a context of that year in 1992, the award season going into 1993, the fact that it did so well, I mean, really was I think almost unprecedented at the time. And so it's a great sort of, I think, reflects a turning point in Oscar history, that a film sort of that gritty, that daring, could do so with the Academy. That kind of I think foreshadowed what was to come. So if you haven't seen The Crying Game, do check it out. Absolutely.
Yes, I agree. I would say check it out. Last time I checked, I think it was on Pluto TV. So just sign up for an account there. Obviously, you have to deal with ads watching it. But yeah, I would recommend it for sure. Because it's a pretty good movie. Going into the awards discussion though, I'll just bring up a couple of pointers before we get into my couple of questions I have to ask. So the Crying Game, as I said, was a box office hit in 1992. But people are probably wondering, but Matt, where did it all start? Was it just like a theatrical release only? Did it do any festivals? It did actually do festivals. I looked this up. It was on thanks to IMDb. It premiered at the Venice Film Festival and also ended up screening, I believe, at the Toronto International Film Festival and New York Film Festival. As we've already stated multiple times, it became a box office hit, and it scored 6 nominations at the Oscars for Picture, Director, Lead Actor for Stephen Ray, Supporting Actor for Jay Davidson, Original Screenplay, and Film Editing. It also scored a Directors Guild of America nomination for Feature Film, and it even won the Writers Guild Award for Original Screenplay. And this is the other one I have to ask you what the hell happened here. It also won the Producers Guild of America Award as well. So before I get into my typical questions, I want to ask, since you were there at the time, how was it that a film like this able to win the PGA prize but not win the Academy Award for Best Picture? I mean, we already know who won Best Picture at the Oscars. It was Unforgiven. But why was it that why do you think the PGA went for this movie over Unforgiven?
Yeah, it's fascinating, Matthew. I tell you, first of all, as someone who was really into the Oscars back then, I didn't really, again, there was no internet back then. We were just reading on, newspapers and magazines and watching TV shows. I didn't really even know what the Producers Guild was at the time.
Oh,
it wasn't, I don't think it was ever reported on. Again, I was, a kid. I was actually a college student in the Midwest, back then. So I didn't know anything about the Producers Guild. So at the time, I wasn't even following the Producers Guild. I think the average moviegoer had no idea what that was, and if there was any correlation between the Producers Guild and the Oscars. Just want to get that out there.
okay.
And now, it's when I didn't find out. I didn't learn that the Crying Game won Producers Guild until a few years later, and I think it's because it just it got so much attention. It was just almost like a phenomenon at the time. The Crying Game, and the fact actually that such a low budget film kind of came out of nowhere and got the recognition that it did, the attention that it did, and became a commercial success. I think that's what producers found really impressive. So Unforgiven was of course won Best Picture and would have seemed like a logical choice for the Producers Guild, or perhaps even Howard Zinn, which was also seen as a strong contender. But I think they went the Crying Game because it was so fascinating. They just couldn't ignore it and appreciated the success that film saw. So I think that was the reason why it won Producers Guild.
Yeah, and I'm even looking at Howard's End. That was also another box office hit. So that could have actually, yeah, that was like another contender that could have won the PGA. Even I'm noticing this right now. Every PGA nominee that year ended up getting into the field for Best Picture. So like Crying Game, Few Good Men, Howard's End, Scent of a Woman, Unforgiven. So that's really interesting. So yeah, I just that was something on my mind going into it. I'm like, how the hell did this win the PGA prize? Not that it was like undeserving, but it's like it's very interesting that they went for that film, even though it didn't win Best Picture at the Oscars. It's almost like I mean, looking back on it, we kind of know why this happened, but it's almost like when The Big Short won PGA. But it
Right.
didn't translate to the Oscars. But it's like, how the hell did this happen? What the hell?
Oh, right, exactly, yes. And I tell you what, Matthew, at the time, nobody thought The Crying Game had any kind of chance of winning Best Picture. I mean, its reward was a nomination. So, even though it won Producers Guild, even if people, watching the awards race were aware of that, I don't think anyone who was aware of the PGA win would have thought, oh, now it's going to win the Oscar. I mean, everyone knew that Unforgiven was pretty much, a lock. And if by chance Unforgiven lost, it would lose to Howard's End. The Crying Game was strictly there, for, just there to be a contender and didn't have a shot at winning, unfortunately.
Yeah, and to speaking of which, though, so you pretty much answered the other question I was just going to jump right into, which was why do you think it won just original screenplay? But you already answered that. So, my next question is would you have given The Crying Game any other Oscars besides screenplay, in your opinion?
Well, to be honest, and by the way, we just first mentioned the reason it won original screenplay. It was up against Husbands and Wives, Lorenzo's Oil, Passion Fish, and Unforgiven. Unforgiven, of course, was the Best Picture winner. And typically, if you have a film that's you're going to win this picture and it's nominated for a writing award, you would expect that it would win that award. But of course, in this case, the plot twist for The Crying Game was undeniable. There was just no way that The Crying Game was not going to win original screenplay. I remember Entertainment Weekly even, which was a new publication at the time, in their Oscar odds, they mentioned that The Crying Game, that its plot twist would pay off here, and so I think people knew that it would win original screenplay. There was debate at the time about supporting actor and whether or not Jay Davidson could pull off an upset. And, Gene Hackman, of course, was the favorite all season long. He won the New York Film Critics and Los Angeles Film Critics Awards for Unforgiven and National Society of Film Critics. He won the Golden Globe. He, of course, had won Best Actor for the French Connection, the Best Picture winner of 1971. So he wasn't like he was, overdue or anything, but it seemed like, given the awards attention he'd received and the fact that he was a well-respected actor in the Best Picture winner, that he was going to win. But there was talk about Jay Davidson pulling off an upset. And Entertainment Weekly mentioned that the Academy did have a soft spot for newcomers in this category, and they used Dr. Hayes Noor in Killing Fields as a comparison. And so they also mentioned that the only reason Hackman could lose would be if there was an upset by Davidson. So there was talk about that. And I'll be honest, as great as Hackman was, and of course he did just recently pass away, as deserving as he was, it would have been just an amazing Oscar moment if Jay Davidson had pulled off a surprise. Because that performance, Hackman in Unforgiven, again, he was terrific, but I think many actors could have done that role, and maybe not quite as well, but many actors could play that part. But as Gene Siskel said on his show when they predicted the winners that year, and he picked a Jay Davidson, who else could have played that part as well as Jay Davidson? And he said that was the reason he would have voted for Jay Davidson. And I think that would have been a really great win. I think that would have really shown that the Academy was, not just going, by the script all the time. And I would have voted for Jay Davidson. Now, I suppose Marissa Tomei was actually, I think, they're well picked that year. They couldn't have had two, but I think Jay Davidson would have been a very, very worthy choice and would have made for a fantastic, fascinating Oscars moment.
Yeah, when it comes to upsets, they're like, we will take one, not two.
Exactly right.
Any more is too much. Yeah, any more is way too much.
Yeah, that's the Crying Game, right? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I did think Jay Davidson was worthy of the nomination. I don't know if I personally would give him the Oscar. Maybe. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen A Few Good Men, and I know I saw Glengarry Glen Ross like a couple years ago, but I mean that was like, okay. In my opinion, I wasn't around at the time, so I could be totally wrong about this, but it almost seemed like the Al Pacino nomination was like, here's your other nomination for the film. You're probably not going to win for Glengarry Glen Ross, but at least it'll show like, hey, you showed like another really good performance here, even though you're obviously going to win for like Scent of Woman, this like overdue, like strongest film type, performance. So yeah. And speaking of which though, but I do agree with you though. That would have been a great upset though for Jay Davidson, if he had found a way to pull it off. But yeah, it did seem like at the time Gene Hackman was gonna win the Oscar for Unforgiven. But speaking of which though, going to lead actor though, I mean I know it's pretty obvious why Al Pacino won for Scent of a Woman. But just to reiterate on the podcast for those of you who aren't aware what happened, would you care to explain to our audience why that situation ended up being what it was?
With Al Pacino?
Yeah, with Al Pacino.
Do you mean the fact that this was viewed as a career achievement award and a performance that many people, don't really admire? Is that what you had in mind, Matthew?
Yeah, just in general, because it to me like I've seen Scent of a Woman. I'm gonna get a lot of shit for this, but I actually don't mind the performance. I know a lot of people don't like the win. I personally don't either, but at the same time, I'm like, if this were like another Meryl Streep or Day-Lewis, where it's like his second or third win, it's like, sure, fine, I'm okay with it. But the fact that it's like his one win at the Oscar, it's just like that's really
Of
weird.
course, right. Yeah, well, Matthew, just to remind people that, this was his seventh nomination. He had, he'd not won before. He was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for The Godfather and had lost to Joel Grey in A Cabaret. He was nominated for Best Lead Actor for The Godfather Part 2 and surprisingly lost to Art Carney in Harry and Tonto. And so, now we're 20 years later, he'd never won. And from the moment I think Son of a Woman came out, and again, this was before the internet, people knew that this was going to be his year. And he won the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor in Motion Picture Drama for Son of a Woman, which, by the way, also won for Best Screenplay and Best Motion Picture Drama at the Golden Globes. Now, that's another story in itself, but he gave this big, long speech at the Golden Globes, and the Oscar was his. There were no SAG Awards yet at that time, but the Oscar was his. It was pretty much a done deal. There was just no way they were not going to deny Al Pacino. And by the way, he was playing a blind person, and it was a very theatrical, showy role. So, I mean, it was the kind of baity performance that the Oscar voters typically did go with, and really, he didn't really have much competition. I mean, Clint Eastwood was nominated, but was never going to win for actor. Directing and picture is where he was going to be rewarded. And Denzel Washington and Malcolm X, who I know many people think deserved it. Both Siskel and Ebert both said that he was their choice for Best Actor. That film hadn't done as well, wasn't as well received with the Academy. Only had one other nomination, I think, for costume design.
Yep.
So his chances were he just won Best Supporting Actor for Glory of 1989. So he would have other chances, and which we also that he would. But so it was Pacino's year from the start, and nobody was going to upset him. That was just it was a foregone conclusion. His victory there.
Yeah, pretty much. It's yeah. It's just you took the words right out of my mouth. It was just
Okay,
like,
great.
like looking through the whole list, it's like, Eastwood wasn't going to do it because they were going to give him director. Washington wasn't going to do it because the film wasn't strong enough. Even Stephen Ray, like he was an unknown actor at the time. Well, at least he wasn't. I wouldn't say he was like completely unknown like Jay Davidson was, but he didn't have that. The what do you call it? The star power.
Filmography, yes, exactly.
The filmography,
yes.
star power, like
Sure.
Al Pacino did. Yeah, exactly. And even the other actor, who was it? Robert Downey Jr. He just didn't have a shot at winning the Oscar either. So yeah, it just ended up being as you said, Al Pacino was just going to win it the whole way through because it's the kind of performance that they like. Although it's funny now that we're back to we're done with this recent Oscar season. I guess going forward, I don't know if you'll agree with me on this, Tariq, but regardless of what we think of these performances, it almost seems like we have another this actor is going to get their career Oscar for like being in like a Son of a Woman, Emilia Perez type movie, so to speak, which I just find funny. It's like,
Oh, sure. Yeah, exactly.
yeah. But yeah, no, as far as like everything else, I had to say, I'm okay with the screenplay win. Like, I think it's a really deserving screenplay winner. I mean, even before I saw it, I probably wouldn't have given, and I've only seen of that original screenplay lineup, Unforgiven and Crying Game. Well, now I've seen Crying Game, but I've only seen Unforgiven, and even I wouldn't give it screenplay because I do like the screenplay and what David Webb Peoples does with that script in terms of deconstructing that Western genre, but it's nothing in terms of anything original or new. It's not doing anything too different to change it from the mold. And really, when you look at Eastwood's films, they're more of a visionary like director almost. Like for Eastwood, I guess it's more like you focus more on the actors and the directing by Eastwood and stuff like this or Mystic River or Unforgiven or even American Sniper to a certain degree, where that's where his strengths lie as a storyteller rather than just the writers he gets along the way. But still, I'm glad Unforgiven did as well as it did. I mean, as you said, it was like a typical Oscar contender that it was going to win the whole way regardless if it won or lost the PGA prize. But it is interesting though, the fact that Unforgiven, it lost PGA and Golden Globes and it still won picture. I just find that really interesting.
Yeah, Matthew, I tell you what, that movie, it came out, it was hit theaters back in September 1982, and I recall
Okay.
seeing it, and it's funny, from the moment it was released, it was being touted as the Oscar frontrunner, so, and that this would be Clint Eastwood's, Career Achievement Award, so it kind
Nice.
of took the lead in the race very early that season, and yeah, it's funny, actually, I thought that Howard Zinn would win the Golden Globe, just because that seemed like the film that they would, go for, and it didn't, but even though it lost, the Golden Globe and lost PGA, yeah, its win at the Oscars for Best Picture was pretty much a foregone conclusion. So I think we knew that. Oh, and by the way, original screenplay. If there had been No the Crying Game that year, I think there's a very good chance that Unforgiven would have won
Yeah.
for screenplay, so I mean, because there's no chance. I mean, Husbands and Wives. I mean, Woody Allen was never going to win for that. I mean, if Judy Davis couldn't win an acting Oscar for that performance, he was not going to win a screenplay award. Of course, that was around the time of all the controversy when his relationship with his stepdaughter sort of came out, and he was getting all this bad publicity. So he was
Boy.
he was never going to win. And by the way, it's that controversy. Many people believe that hurt Judy Davis in her bid for Best Supporting Actress, because that was a terrific performance and would have been worthy. So he was never going to win. And Lorenzo's Oil, a well-written film, was never going to win. And Passion Fish from John Sayles, even though it had a Best Actress nomination for Mary McDonnell, that was not a contender. So Unforgiven would have been, I think, a slam dunk for original screenplay if there had been no The Crying Game. So
Yep, exactly. I agree, because it's like even looking at like the other nominees real quick, like taking a glance at it, it's like, yeah, none of these other films in the screenplay category were even close to a Best Picture or Director nomination. In fact, what's interesting enough, I going on to this awards section itself, I find it really fascinating for years to see A Few Good Men manage to get into Best Picture but not Director. And who did they go for that fifth spot? Robert Altman for The Player. And now that I've seen Robert Altman for the Robert Altman's The Player, I think it was like last year. I think, yeah, I could see why he got in for director over Rob Reiner, especially when Rob Reiner is such a commercial populist type filmmaker. I even talked about it as well with Christina Ewing Bureau on When Harry Met Sally, how Rob Reiner is a very workmanlike director. He's very solid at what he does, but he's not the kind that the director's branch of the Academy would want to be like, let's give him a director nomination, unless the film really stood out that well for him. I mean, we've seen a couple of like workman-like directors get in every so often, like James Mangold for A Complete Unknown, where despite them being who they are, the Academy was just so enamored by said film, and they're like, let's throw him a director nomination. But this year was like, we're not going to give that to Rob Reiner. Here's your producing nomination, and we'll give Robert Altman the Oscar nod for The Player. And it's a very like Hollywoodized type movie, and it still misses Best Picture. I just find really, really interesting.
that if you could have been, the player that it missed Best Picture, right? Okay,
Yeah, the player
yeah.
missed.
It's funny. There was talk that it might get into Best Picture, but it was just it was a very competitive year, and so I think before the nominations, I think pretty much everyone knew the five films that would get in: The Crying Game, A Few Good Men, Howard Zinn, Son of a Woman, Unforgiven, and it was pretty much, I think, it was pretty much known that the player was likely going to miss, and it was probably sixth in the lineup, but yeah. And by the way, it's funny that Billy Crystal, who of course had worked with Rob Reiner in When Harry Met Sally, in his opening number at the Oscars that year, he made fun of it in his song. He made that there was a line about the A Few Good Men is being celebrated. Why is the director not nominated? And he's
Yeah.
saying nominations 1, 2, nominations 3, 4. Go figure, Rob. No more. So he poked a little fun at his friend Rob Reiner there. But A Few Good Men, it was a commercial success, and it was a good film. So it getting in for Best Picture over The Player, I think, was kind of expected.
Well, sure, yeah, but I of course, yeah, like, but I still find it funny at the same time. It's like,
Oh, sure. I get you. Yeah.
even in A Field of Five, The Player, which is such a Hollywoodized type movie, like about Hollywood filmmaking, and it
Right.
still misses picture. I just
Yeah.
find that to be so funny.
Yeah. The
So,
player should have been a player, but it was not. Right.
yeah. The other thing I also want to bring up, speaking of Billy Crystal, wasn't that the same ceremony where after Gene Hackman won, rest in peace, by the way, to Gene Hackman, great
Yes.
actor. Wasn't that the same moment or the same ceremony where Billy Crystal got up on stage and he's like, he told his buddy, oh God, who was it that was nominated for supporting actor?
David Paymer from
David
Mr. Saturday
Paymer.
Night. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and he tells him like, David, you
Yeah.
or Rob? No.
Yeah.
I just find it really. I just think we
Yes.
need to do a recount and really dig through this. There's something wrong here.
Right, yeah. It's funny that the Paymer's nomination, he was lucky he even got in for Mr. Saturday Night. And in fact, in Billy Crystal's opening number, at the very end, he made a joke about Mr. Saturday Night, and he said, I just wanted to see what it would feel like, so sue me. So, yeah, he had to make that joke about his castmate. I mean, you have to assume that Billy Crystal must have voted for David Paymer, right?
Oh,
So,
probably, yeah.
yes,
I would assume.
yeah,
Although he probably knew even voting for him, he's like,
right,
I'm probably
exactly.
not gonna. He's probably not gonna win, but I'm just gonna give him my nominate. I'm gonna give him my vote anyways.
Exactly.
So,
Though that would have been something, though, if Billy Crystal had been snubbed for Mr. Saturday Night and his co-star was nominated and won the Oscar, the ceremony that he was hosting, that would have been just hilarious, right?
oh yeah, definitely, yeah. That would have been. I'm actually curious if that has ever happened before. A period where like a host got snubbed for the Oscar, but his co-star won the Oscar the same night. I don't know if that's ever happened before, but that would be very funny if someone were able to dig up that history or that's ever happened before. So, yeah. But yeah, other than that, I don't really have anything else to add on to this award season race. Funny enough, we had a little bit of a technical issue yesterday. Uh, and after I finished with the Crying Game, I was about to start Howard's End, but when you had texted me earlier, like I'm having a bit of a situation here. I was like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna stop Howard's End. I'm just gonna focus my attention to make sure, like everything to do everything I can in my power to make sure that you come onto the show and talk about the Crying Game and its award chances. So I just want to say thank you so much, Tariq, for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, great. Thanks. Matthew, may I just, bring up one last thing if we have time, if I
Yeah,
may?
sure. Yeah, go ahead.
This
Yeah.
because this I think people who weren't around at the time would find fascinating. When the Crying Game was getting this award's attention, and it had the Golden Globe nomination, and then the Oscar nominations came out. I had not seen myself as an Oscar buff. I had not seen the Crying Game myself when the nominations were announced because it wasn't playing anywhere where I lived. And I think for a lot of people in the country who didn't live in a big city, they had not seen the Crying Game when the nominations came out. So when Jay Davidson was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, nobody knew who he was or who he played, and so it wasn't really clear like what that it wasn't really clear that he played the character of Dill and that his nomination was part of the secret. And actually, when he was nominated, I know that at the time, Joe Siegel and some other people were saying that he should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actress because that way they wouldn't give him the secret. And so that was actually there was talk at the time that he should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actress, but of course, they weren't going to do that. And his nomination, was sort of put the film's plot twist at risk. And in fact, Entertainment Weekly, when they were analyzing the Oscar odds that year in Best Supporting Actor, they mentioned about Jay Davidson that the one thing hurting him was that voters would not want to give away the secret because when the Oscars came around at the end of March of 1993, again, most people had not seen The Crying Game, and if Jay Davidson had won, and they would have kind of realized who he played, then it would have given away the secret. It's funny, even the clip of the Oscars they played of Jay Davidson, they showed him like not in dressed as a woman, but afterwards when it was revealed that he was a man, they showed that clip because they didn't want viewers to know the secret. So that category placement at the time did generate a lot of discussion, and if he'd been nominated, it would have been fascinating if by chance they'd nominated for him for Best Supporting Actress. And it's funny, Entertainment Weekly also mentioned that he may have been nominated just to see what he would wear to the ceremony. So that nomination, the category
Yeah.
placement, it was just so fascinating. It was so much fun at the time. It's too bad we didn't have the internet and all these great podcasts that we have now, because we would have just had a field day, debating this nomination, that award season, and this race in particular for Jay Davidson for Best Supporting Actor.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, even the whole Marissa Tomei supporting actress thing, which just
Oh,
blows my
sure.
mind. Like I didn't even know that was like the first award of the night, and it's like, what? Wait, what? Like already we're gonna get like the biggest surprise of the night, like right here. That's like having Mikey the lead actress category this past year to be like the first thing we're gonna announce
Right.
is lead actress. It's like what?
Yeah,
Like you
exactly.
don't want to wait until we get close to the end to picture? Like
Right.
okay, all right. They're
Yeah,
just ripping the band-aid right now. So
right, exactly. And it was actually a smart move in a sense because at the time, I mean, supporting actress was the one category that most people watching the Oscars were so unsure about it. Nobody knew who to pick for their Oscar pool. So it was, I
yeah.
mean, and at the time, it was actually a great way to begin the show because, by the way, when Marissa Tomei won, people kind of thought, like, okay, we have no idea the way the show is going to go because if they went with her for supporting actress, who knows? Maybe The Crying Game will win Best Picture after all. Who knows?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. Because usually if you have like a big upset like that early on, I mean, again, even like this last year's Oscars, it's like when animated feature went to Flow, and it's like right then and there, I had a couple people text me like, "Okay, Matt, this is gonna be an Oscars that's gonna be filled with a lot of upsets," and I'm like, "Oh yeah," and there were a lot of upsets, not just in the main categories. I'm talking like the other categories too, like international film and even the shorts in and themselves were upsets in some of the text. But yeah, it's crazy. But I do, even though yes, the Oscar predictor, completionist or whatever, who wants to make sure I get like 100% right on my predictions, which there's no way anyone's gonna be able to do that. But that side of me was kind of like, I kind of want to get these predictions right so I get bragging rights, but at the same time, realistically, I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna get any of these right to begin with. So it's like that every season, though. But every once in a while, even with you, Tariq, whenever you get a predicting, you get a winner right or a predicted right, then you're like, hey, I got bragging rights. So you could sort of ask now you're going to be like the kid who won the $1 million
Right.
game or
Yes.
whatever. So
Yeah,
yeah, you know
Matthew
what I
kind of
mean.
mentioned, I did, yeah, I kind of mentioned quickly. This year, for
Yep.
example, I bombed in the major, on like, picture and director and actress. I bombed there, but I did get 2 out of the 3 shorts right, including best animated short film, which went to In the Shadow of the Cypress. So that's my consolation prize. That at least
Yeah.
I called like one long shot, right? So
Yeah, that after the show, I have a really funny story to tell you about that. I'll tell you off air, which I thought
sounds
was so
good.
funny. But anyway, so once again, thank you so much, Tarek, for being on the show, talking about the Crying Game. And I yeah, it's nice to have you on here, and I hope to have you on back on again down the road. If you're interested in being on here again, who knows? Maybe we might even talk about like a lone screenplay nominee that was just like a random, like, how the hell did this happen type thing. Because because like you said before, you've been around watching the Oscars for even longer than I have, so you probably have more knowledge to throw on the show than me. So yeah, so I just go ahead. Sorry.
So sounds great. Thanks so much. Yeah, look forward to being back on at some point in the future. It'd be great to talk to you again, Matthew.
Awesome. Is there anything you'd like to plug into our listeners where you could follow along after the show is done, or anything you'd like to give a big shout out to? Anyone?
Oh, great. Well, I just want to say thanks to our mutual friend Jack Mahanes for suggesting me, for your show. And of course, yeah, if you go to Gold Derby, you can see my predictions there for the Oscars for next season when the Prediction Center opens up. And feel free to make fun of me. I get a lot of attention, but I think that's great that people that enjoy commenting on my predictions. And I try to make things I try to make things interesting, because if all the pundits predict the same things, there's no fun in that.
Oh, of
So
course.
I
Yeah.
enjoy going long shots. I enjoy people making fun of me. So please follow Gold Derby, make fun of me, and let's have a lot of fun. How's that?
But you know what? At least you got animated short. That is
There you
something
go.
that I did not get it right, and I'm like, you know what? Kudos to you for getting that right, because
Great,
that
thanks.
was kind of a tough category to predict this past year. But anyways, so as for myself, you can follow me and the show through Linktree at Matthew995, where you could follow along on all my social media accounts such as Twitter and Letterboxd. On the same side, I provide a link for where you can listen to more episodes of the show. And if you're interested in being in the hot seat like Tariq Khan has today, let me know, and hopefully we can arrange that happening soon. We have, like I said before in the last episode, we have plenty more episodes to get through of these Lone Screenplay Winners. I might even bring on some of my Chicago buddies that I watched the Oscars to, and that was a very interesting. We already picked out a film a year or two ago, and I won't say what it is, but I think it'll be an interesting discussion we'll have, because the two of them have some interesting takes on that film. So that'll come out whenever, but hopefully we'll have that soon. We have plenty more episodes to go through for the whole year. In the meantime, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and we hope to see you at the movies. Take care, guys.